Well, aloha everyone, and welcome back to Human Nutrition here at Chaminade University. We will be delving into Unit 14 through the next two videos. We'll be splitting them in half. Unit 14 deals with life cycle nutrition, and A will deal with toddlers through adolescence, and then B will deal with elderly nutrition. So, for this part of the chapter, we'll be talking about the nutrient needs of toddlers and preschoolers and talk about how parents are involved in the preferences of a school-age child's food choices and talk about the nutritional needs of younger children and the kind of nutritional related issues that face school-age children, including those that are overweight or obese. Then we'll move on to the adolescents. We'll talk about the nutritional needs of adolescents and talk about nutritional issues that affect adolescents, namely disordered eating. So, eating disorders we'll touch on. And then we'll talk about health risks of obesity and these eating disorders in children and teens. So, when we're looking at the nutritional needs of toddlers, we're looking at individuals that are 1 to 3 years old. We are still growing quite rapidly at this time, but much more slowly than those that are infants. During the second year of an individual's life, they're gaining approximately 3 to 5 pounds and 3 to 5 inches. And that means that they're going to still have high nutritional needs, but they're going to diminish in comparison to those of infants. Individuals that are in the 3 to 5-year-old range are considered preschoolers. And toddlers and preschoolers are going to need the same nutritions that adults need, but they're going to need them in different amounts because they're going to have lower energy needs, smaller appetites, and smaller stomachs. Now, pediatricians use growth charts to determine the rate of growth of a child, and they do that based on a comparison to information that they've gathered on the national level that allows us to determine standards for their age and their gender. This allows children to be placed into a percentile, and that way we can look at children who may be at risk, such as any individuals that are below the 10th percentile or above the 80th percentile would be ones that they'd be looking at as high risk for being under or over weight or height. That's what a growth chart looks like. So you're going to have to look at the age, have the age denoted in months here, and then we're going to be looking at over time their weight, and their height. And so basically what you're going to do is you're going to figure out the age of the individual, and then you're going to go ahead and take a look at where they fit on this curve in terms of their height, or it's considered length here, and their weight. So for example, an individual who's at the 50 percentile mark when they are 30 months old would be approximately 62 and a half inches in length. Oh, sorry, 62 and a half centimeters in length, I apologize. Somewhere on the order of 24 and a half inches. All right, so we can use this growth chart to determine whether an individual is falling within the appropriate range, right, namely between 25 and 75 percentile. And if they're falling too far out of, or these range either too low or too high, then we could target this individual for pediatric treatment. All right, so a younger child is going to need to eat more often than an adult. They need to eat frequent meals that are small meals and nutrient-dense foods. They need about 1,000 to 1,400 kilocalories per day, so about half that of a normal adult. But they're going to need nutrient-dense foods and multiple meals and snacks throughout the day. However, parents should avoid encouraging children to eat more than they need. So when a child says that they're full, they truly probably are full. Remember, they have much smaller stomachs. So you want to make sure that you're choosing appropriate portion sizes for children. So you want to use child-sized plates, child-sized cups. And if you want a general estimate for the portion size, basically whatever food item you're serving them at that meal, you should have about 1 tablespoon of each food item for each year of age. So if they're 3, they should have 3 tablespoons of each food item on their plate. Additionally, one of the main things you want to do is try to avoid choking hazards by cutting up the food for them or offering food that's already in bite-sized pieces. Some of the major hazards for choking include hot dogs, large chunks of meat, cubes of cheese, for example. Peanut butter can be very thick and hard to swallow sometimes. Nuts and seeds can get caught. Or if they end up taking in a breath while they're chewing, it can be aspirated. Whole grapes and raisins are certainly grapes are a no-no. They can get stuck in the back. Hard candy and gum. That's why they actually invented lifesavers. Lifesavers are called lifesavers because of that hole in the center, such that if a child does get one lodged in their throat, they're still able to breathe through that hole. Previous to that, hard candy, like those grandma's hard candies that they'd have out, those would be a severe choking hazard for young children. Additional things include popcorn and raw vegetables like carrots, for example. So you want to make sure that you limit the availability of these items to a 4-year-old or under, and if you do serve these items, that you have them cut up into appropriate sizes. Additionally, children should never eat laying down. They should always be in the sitting position when they eat to help mitigate choking hazards. All right, so young children, just like adults, need carbohydrates, proteins, fats, all of the major biomolecular groups. In terms of carbohydrates, they should be ingesting about 50%, so 45 to 65% of their daily kilocalorie intake should come from carbohydrates. And half of the grains that they take should be from whole grains. Additional fiber recommendations are about 19 grams for those under 3 and between 4 to 8, 25 grams. If we're looking at proteins, the recommended daily allowance is 1 gram per kilogram of body weight for toddlers and 0.95 grams per kilogram of body weight for school age. So again, about 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. As we're looking at fat, an individual from 2 to 3 years old should be about 30 to 35% kcals from fat, and 4 and older should be about 25 to 35% of kcals from fat. So that means that the younger they are, the higher percentage of fat that they should be consuming in their diet. But you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the types of fats that they're ingesting. We want to limit the solid fats. You also want to limit any additional sugars. And you want to try to make sure that they're getting polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats. So really the good fats are going to be the unsaturated fats. In terms of calcium, this is going to be very vital for healthy bone development. We need a lot of calcium, approximately 700 milligrams per day from the 1 to 3 range, and 1,000 milligrams per day from the 4 to 5 range. Particularly in this age, this is an age when their bones are developing very rapidly, and they can end up with brittle bones during this time frame, which young school children often end up with their first break between 4 and 10 years old, their first bone break. So you want to try to mitigate that, obviously, by making sure they get enough calcium in their body. Additionally, they're going to need a good intake of iron, which can come from things like meats, beans, and fortified cereals. This is going to be very necessary during the periods of rapid growth. And during these time frames, oftentimes children will be very sleepy, or they'll be sleeping more than normal, taking long naps, because the growth is going to be something that is going to be happening more while they're sleeping. Additionally, we want to make sure that while they are getting cow's milk to help with the calcium, you're going to have to get an external source of iron as well. Cow's milk is not a very good source of iron. And if we end up iron deficient, this is called anemia. This is a very common deficiency in younger children. And it can be associated with a couple things, including lead poisoning and the exacerbation of ADHD. And this can lead to developmental delays and mental deficits, so you want to make sure that we are getting the right amount of iron in. The flip side of the coin is iron toxicity. So if we end up with too much iron in the individual, it can build up in their tissues and organs, which can be fatal. So you do want to make sure that you're monitoring pretty carefully the amount of iron that the individuals are taking in at this time. Additionally, vitamin D is a very important nutrient. From 1 to 8 years old, individuals should be getting about 10 micrograms of vitamin D per day. You can get this from milk, egg yolk, from fish. But if they're drinking 2 8-ounce glasses of milk, that's only half of the recommended vitamin D intake. So oftentimes these individuals should be taking fortified cereals as supplements, or you can also get a vitamin D, etc., from a daily vitamin. Now, children need quite a lot of fluid, but again, you want to make sure that you're matching the fluid recommendations to the body weight, as if you take in too much or too little fluid, you can cause a problem. Too much fluid can reduce the fiber or iron intake. So you want to make sure that you are getting the right fluids as well. You want to try to avoid soda, sugary drinks. You don't want to give them 100% fruit juice either, again, because the amounts of sugar in there. The preferred beverages are going to include water and milk. Child diets need to be pretty well planned because children might not be able to eat enough food to meet the nutrient needs. So that means that you have to make sure that you are feeding them nutrient-dense food and that they're eating several times throughout the day. Additionally, children who are vegetarian or vegan are going to need to have a little bit more monitoring of their diet. They're going to make sure that they get good sources of calcium, iron, and zinc, all of which you tend to get from animal products. And vegan children need to have not only calcium, iron, and zinc, but also vitamin B12. Now, eating habits are very important and they're established very early in life. Children basically will adapt to whatever foods are offered to them when they are younger, and that means that you want to expose them to food of all different types of varieties. Additionally, children tend to have a little bit of a distaste when foods are first ordered to them, or offered to them, So oftentimes a child will need to be exposed to a food multiple times, 10 to 15 times, before accepting it as a new food source. All right, so this is showing you the food skills of young children as they get older. Around age 1 to 2, children should be able to tear and snap their vegetables, drink from a cup, feed themselves, at least help to feed themselves. By age 3, they should be able to help pour, mix, shake, and spread foods. By 4, they should be able to peel an orange, crack an egg, and use all utensils and napkins. By 5, They should be able to assist with actual cooking techniques such as measurements, cutting with supervision, of course, grinding and grading their foods. Now, the division of responsibility between parent and child is kind of a little bit of overlap. So, parents are really supposed to be choosing what, when, and where food is offered to the child. And child, their responsibility is to choose whether or not to eat and how much to eat. Now, encouraging a child to clean their plate may encourage them to overeat simply because they have much smaller stomachs than we do. So, we might look at a portion and assume that that's reasonable, but it's actually over a portion for them. So you want to allow children to stop eating when they say that they feel full instead of forcing them to take those last couple of bites. Remember that your behavior influences your children's behavior. Children are going to model after the adult behaviors, and that's going to include your unhealthy behaviors as well. So you want to make sure that you are practicing healthy food choices and including your children in food shopping, menu planning, and meal preparation so that they can help encourage variety in their food consumption. Now, oftentimes, young children can be very picky about what they eat, not wanting to try new foods, thinking that new foods are disgusting, particularly new vegetables. We can also have what's called a food jag, which is when children get into a rut and will only eat their limited selection of food. They only want nuggets and mac and cheese or whatnot. Typically, these are temporary, and after a couple of months, they will expand back out. They'll get sick of that food source. But if we have a long-term food jag, this can increase the risk of nutrient deficiency because whatever that food is might not be providing all of the nutrients. So you want to try to offer a variety of food items within that preferred food type. So, okay, you're only eating mac and cheese. Well, I'm still going to try to slip some tomatoes in here or something to try to get some other types of food in that preferred food type and gradually wean that child from the food item. If we get to the point where we are really stuck in this jag and the child will only eat this particular food item, you're going to have to resort to supplementation with vitamins. All right, so school-age children are classified as 6 to 12 years old. Well, again, they're not fully grown children, and they're still going to be gaining weight, about 7 pounds per year. However, they're not going to eat as often as toddlers and preschoolers, and they have ability to maintain their blood glucose for longer, so they're not going to be as hungry as often, and that's also because they're able to eat more food in each sitting. So as they get older, they're going to get closer to the 3 meals a day instead of toddlers or 5 to 6 meals a day. And they're going to be eating larger portions per sitting. This is another time frame when we want to help impact their development by helping them make healthy dietary choices. And again, they're going to be developing their habits based on the modeling of adult behaviors. So you as the adult are going to have to go ahead and sneak those bad habit foods in the bathroom instead of flaunting it in front of the children. All right, so here's some KCAL needs for children and adolescents. I'm not going to read them out loud to you, but basically you can find the age here. And then you either have, so for the 2 to 3 years old, male and female are not separated, but going forward, male and female are separated. And then it tells you how much they would need if they're sedentary, right? Did you put them in front of the tablet all day? Are they moderately active or are they highly active? And depending on their activity level, you want to vary the KCALs that they are ingesting. The main message here is that we want to be physically active every day. We want to choose healthier foods from each of the food groups. And you want to make sure that you're eating foods from every food group every day. Now, as always, we want to make sure you eat more of certain food groups than of others. You want to make sure that you're falling within the percentage KCAL recommendations for the different things like fats and proteins, etc., and carbohydrates. But the key thing here is taking it one step at a time. You're not going to want to change your diet immediately overnight. Just make small, subtle choices that are right for you, that are healthier for you, and then expand that to your family. As a society, we contribute to children's nutritional status through multiple different programs, including the National School Lunch Program, which is going to serve low cost or free lunches to millions of school-age children every day. And that's going to allow them to make sure that they're getting, for some children, this is really the only solid meal that they'll be getting every day. And that makes sure that they're getting the minimum intakes of KCALs, proteins, vitamins, and supplements like calcium, iron, vitamin A, vitamin C, etc. And it's going to have a cap on the maximum intake of total fat and saturated fat. And that means that individuals who are participating in these programs are going to have lower amounts of sugar-sweetened beverages and eat foods that have higher nutrient density than individuals that are non-participants. This is a really good way in which low-income students are able to get their nutritional needs met by the state. All right, so this graph here is going to show the nutrient and energy allowances, including your total energy allowance, the percentage of saturated fats and KCALs, and the amount of sodium in milligrams that you should be taking in every day, depending on which grade your students are in. And again, this is going to vary as they get a little bit older. Now, breakfast is one of the most important meals of the day, and I know that a lot of students may skip breakfast or eat unhealthy breakfast, but you want to make sure that you're eating a very healthy breakfast in order to maintain a healthy body weight because that's what's going to jumpstart your metabolism. So your metabolism doesn't really get out of sleepy time mode until you've put some food into your body. And so you want to, even at the very minimum, eat a piece of toast or something to help get your metabolism started. Eating breakfast has many benefits. Including that it increases your cognitive function. It gives you some sort of calories to work with so your brain can function. Remember, we're going to need blood glucose in order for our brain to work well. So that's going to allow us to increase our memory, increase our academic performance, increase attendance at the school as well. You might not be as lethargic, you'll be paying more attention, and you are going to be in a better mood, which gives you a better psychosocial function. So all of these are good benefits to eating a nice, healthy breakfast in the morning. Now, we want to make sure that all individuals aged 2 and older eat at least 2 servings of fruit and 3 servings of vegetables. And the emphasis here is going to be on your dark green vegetables and your red and orange vegetables. And we as parents should be setting the example for the children. Again, children are going to emulate what they see from their elders. So you want to make sure that you as the adult show your children that you're eating fruits and vegetables. Make sure you're consuming fruits and vegetables during most meals. And in traditional dishes, you can get away with hiding vegetables by using pureed vegetables in things like your mac and cheeses or whatnot. So you can actually get the vegetable content in without the children necessarily knowing. All right, so some children can have food allergies and food intolerance, and these are children whose diets are going to have to be more closely monitored. Now, a food allergy would be an allergic reaction or an abnormal response triggered by the body's immune system when that food is present. And some symptoms can include swelling, right? Some people who have nut allergies or fish allergies, for example, can end up asphyxiated by blocking off their airways because of the swelling in their throats. It can also cause nausea, coughing, vomiting, etc. And eventually it could even cause things like blackout and death if we've cut off the airway for too long. So obviously the treatment is to avoid the foods containing the allergens, but a secondary treatment would be to carry an EpiPen with you if you know that you have an allergy. The most allergenic foods are going to be eggs, milk, peanuts, tree nuts, soy, wheat, shellfish, and fish. So that's all going to be what's considered a food allergy. Now, a food intolerance would be when we have issues with the digestion of that particular food. So we're not going to create antibodies, we're not going to have an immune response, but we are going to have issues digesting whatever that food is. So we're not going to get the nutrients that we need out of it, and it can cause issues in the digestive pathway. A very unfortunate statistic is that American school-age children are increasing their rates of obesity every year. More than 17% of U.S. children and adolescents are considered to be overweight or obese. The categories are overweight has to be 95th or above percentile, and at risk for overweight is that your BMI is going to be greater than the 85th but less than the 95th. So you're at risk but aren't quite in the overweight percentile. And we need to take additional assessments, not just the weight itself or the BMI itself. So you want to take body composition measurements, evaluate the diet, physical activity, family history, etc. when you're looking at the obesity or rate of obesity in U.S. children and adolescents. And this is what I mean is that over time, we end up with an increase in childhood obesity. We're also seeing, so here we have the 2 to 5-year-old, that's in purple, 6 to 11 here in green, and 12 to 19 in blue. And this is going to be the survey period. So in the late 70s, we were hovering right around 5 to 6%. Now we've more than doubled that in 2009 to 10. We're at 12 to 18%, which is much, much higher than we previously saw in the late 70s. So there's several reasons for that, and we'll talk about those reasons or a couple of those reasons in a minute. But the problem that we're seeing is that an individual has too much body weight for his or her height and can cause severe physical problems and medical conditions later on in the road. So what causes childhood obesity? So a very small percentage of cases are linked to genetics. So some individuals really just do have a propensity for putting on body mass. But really what it comes down to is a combination of overconsumption of cake house and a sedentary lifestyle. It all is calories in, calories out. More calories in, less calories out is going to cause obesity. And there's several other factors for that, right? The sedentary lifestyle can come because parents are leading a sedentary lifestyle. So that goes to your family environment, but also the environments outside the home. Where are the children going? To the babysitters or to school environment, etc. And everywhere they go, they're influenced by multiple different things, not just the parents, but also advertising, right? So when you're advertising dollars or when you see advertising for donuts or all of these different sweet drinks, Then they say, Mom, I really want a Coca-Cola, and you give in, right? Also, peer influence. Everybody else is drinking Coca-Cola, Mom, etc. So childhood obesity is directly linked to advertising of food manufacturers and also the influence of peers and other people, not just the people that are inside their home. Now, as I mentioned, there are some genetic disorders that can cause obesity or overweight symptoms. Some examples of that are Prader-Willi syndrome and Down syndrome. So sometimes we do have issues where we simply are not metabolizing the food normally. And for these individuals, again, it comes down to calories in, calories out. So changing their nutrition and changing the level of physical activity will have the greatest impact on their ability to maintain a healthy weight. Typically, individuals who are overweight and or obese have a combination of an overconsumption of kilocalories, so more kcals in than they should, and less kcals out than they should, so an underparticipation in physical activity. All right, so where do these overconsumption of kcals come from? Typically, they come from what we call empty calories, like soda, candy bars, potato chips, food that gives you calories but no nutrition. So it leaves you still feeling a little bit hungry. So they're not nutritional dense, although they are kcal dense food. And oftentimes this food is sold within the school building in vending machines or whatnot. Also available at your local 7-Eleven or other convenience stores. So students that are going to pick up food on the way home are more likely to pick up things like soda and candy bars than they are a fresh sandwich. So that means they typically are going to replace the healthier options, milk, water, or fresh fruits and vegetables, because these are less likely to be chosen by school-aged children. So what you want to try to do is to replace your soda, candy bars, potato chips, etc. with milk, water, and fresh fruits and vegetables. Another reason that we can end up with this overweight or obesity epidemic is because of the size of portion sizes. Portion sizes are perceived as so much larger than they actually are. So when you go to a restaurant and you get takeout, you're probably ordering 2 or 3 serving sizes. And then if you eat it all in one sitting, well, you've way overconsumed your calories. And this happens when we go to fast food restaurants, when we go everywhere. So both within and outside of the home, portion sizes are not in alignment with your actual nutritional portion size content, right? And that leads to an increase in the amount of calories that are going in without an individual even necessarily knowing that. Additionally, people who graze, so an increase in snacking, or they have missed meal times and then they kind of overcompensate for that, can also cause an issue with overconsumption of kilocalories. And again, the flip side of that is underparticipation in physical activity. Children spend a much larger amount of time in front of the electronic devices such as the television, the computer, or video games, and now we even need that for our schooling. Individuals 8 to 18 spend about 3 hours of TV daily. And honestly, I think that's probably an under amount of time now that we're all so connected to our electronic devices for education as well. But just looking at our leisure activity like television, the television ads are going to constantly be peppering our brains with the idea of consumption of unhealthy foods, fatty foods, and snacking. So it's a combination of a sedentary lifestyle and additional snacking while you're sitting doing nothing, watching TV. Additionally, there's less activity during school and other parts of the day, and we are driving longer and longer time frames, so children are spending more time in the car than they used to in the past. So how do we combat all of these? How do we reduce the risk of our children becoming overweight and obese? Well, again, it all comes down to kcals in and kcals out. But not just kcals, right? You want to make sure you're bringing in adequate nutrients without the excessive kcalories, and that the children are offered healthy foods, variety of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and low-fat dairy. And last but not least, as the adults, we have to be good role models. We have to make sure that we're making appropriate dietary choices so our children are seeing that we're making good choices and that hopefully they'll make those choices too. And although this one is really hard, we want to try to limit the amount of screen time that the individuals are checking out, are basically plugging into every day. And I know it's laughable to hear that because I know that we are all way more than 2 hours per day now that we're electronically learning, but hopefully COVID will be over soon. All right, so how do we treat individuals that are overweight or obese? So we don't want to toss an overweight child into a weight loss program. That's not necessarily recommended because usually that means limiting or restricting kcals. And so what we need to do is or having them encouraged to participate in physical activity. So we want to make sure that we have a weight maintenance program, which allows the child to continue to grow in a healthy fashion without putting on additional weight as they age. And this is all going to help us promote a more healthy lifestyle. So, again, we want to try to change the food that's going in, make it more nutritionally dense, and increase the amount of time that the children spend with physical exercise. All right, so adolescents are considered 9 to 19 years. This is a very important developmental period that's kind of an in-between period between childhood and adulthood. And we have a lot of physical changes that are happening during this time frame, including a major growth spurt. So our height's going to increase drastically, and our weight is also going to increase drastically. This is going to be associated with bone growth and body mass gains and body fat stores. Females are going to have the onset of menstruation. Both males and females are undergoing severe hormonal changes. And all of this brings us back to the importance of a healthy diet. A healthy diet is super vital during these time frames to ensure that the individuals are getting the adequate nutrients that they need in order to support all of these physical changes that are occurring. It's a time of very rapid bone growth. And most of our bone mass is going to accumulate during adolescence. So individuals that have inadequate calcium intake can have a low bone mass, and that's a very high risk factor for osteoporosis, both at that time as a child, but also as they age. So you want to make sure that you're getting your recommended daily amounts of both calcium and vitamin D every day. Also, adolescents are going to need additional iron. And adolescent females need even more iron in order to replenish their blood losses during menstruation. So your RDA for iron is about 15 milligrams for a 14 to 18-year-old female, and 11 milligrams for a 14 to 18-year-old male. That means that iron deficiency is super common in adolescence, particularly because this tends to be a time when individuals are limiting the intake of their food, particularly if they are having some sort of social pressure to do so. And we'll talk about eating disorders in a little bit. But individuals who are limiting the amount of food that are coming in are going to end up iron deficient, particularly individuals who are limiting the amount of grains, lean meats, and legumes that they are ingesting. Now, when we talk about disordered eating patterns, they tend to be more prevalent in females than in males because adolescent females tend to have a much more important idea of body image. Typically, this is linked with poor body image or low self-esteem, and this is a time when many teens adopt unhealthy eating habits in order to keep themselves very skinny or because they're just very busy. Oftentimes, they will skip meals, use food substitutes, or take diet pills to help increase their metabolism, or take nutritional supplements instead of a meal, something like an Ensure or whatnot. And in severe cases, they can also end up purging the nutrients out of their body through laxatives, diuretics, and vomiting. So these are individuals who are going to be very much at risk for nutritional deficits. Individuals on the opposite side who are obese children are going to be much more likely to become type 2 diabetics or enter into pre-diabetic conditions. Some of these contributing factors, again, are going to be obesity, which is tied to lack of physical activity. And they also can have, there is a play for your family history. So you want to take a look and see if you have diabetes that runs in your family, you're much more likely to develop diabetes yourself. So in order to prevent type 2 diabetes, a doctor wants to make sure that they can identify individuals who are high risk, and we do that based on family history, etc. And then they'll target those individuals and ask them to reduce their risk factors. Typically, that means monitoring your weight, hopefully aiming for weight loss, and increasing your physical activity. So that means you want to make sure that you're adopting healthy eating habits to help target the overweight issue, limiting the empty kilocalorie and low nutrient foods, things like sugary beverages like sodas, high fat snack foods, sweets, etc. And you want to eat more of your nutrient dense foods, such as fruits, vegetables, whole grains, etc. Now, individuals who have experienced childhood obesity are much more likely to have a range of medical conditions, including high cholesterol, high blood pressure, increased risk for cardiovascular disease, and pre-diabetic conditions. Additionally, they can have bone and joint problems because they're carrying around too much weight, and sometimes they're also getting calcium deficiency because they might not be eating a healthy diet. And they can also suffer from sleep apnea, which is a condition where you stop breathing for a short while you are asleep and then jerk yourself either awake or it just starts to reset. Additionally, they can have psychological and social problems, such as the stigma of being overweight and low self-esteem associated with this, all of which can be a problem, particularly for adolescents. Now, individuals who were obese as children and adolescents are much more likely to remain obese as an adult, which is going to further increase their risk for adult health problems, including things like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, several different types of cancer, osteoarthritis, stroke, sleep apnea, etc., and also non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So all of these are diseases that can be mitigated. The risk can be mitigated by attempting to change your diets and keep yourself in a healthy weight range. All right, so that's going to bring us to the end of our lecture for the life cycle nutrition for adolescents, and then we will jump right into 14B in just a moment. So thank you so much for bearing with me today, and I will see you all soon. Happy studying.